this has been amazing, right, Rashad? We've Ariel and us, we've been talking about this for such a long time, and finally here it is. Um, this being a Friday, we are most interested in how to staff a membership newsroom, just because we think that the skills required are very different, job descriptions are very different, roles very different. The way you would attract and retain talent is going to be very different for membership newsrooms versus your regular off the mill, newsroom. So without further ado, we know that both of you have been working really hard on this one. Thank you so much for putting this out there into the community, because it makes a huge difference. Now people have something to refer to with all the great case studies out there. Ariel, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the hope with the membership guide. Is presentations are fantastic, but people need the information when they need to make the decisions. And so our hope is that by making the membership guide available, all that is there whenever a newsroom needs it, whether they are trying to spin up a marketing campaign to leverage a news moment, or they're trying to make a hiring decision, whatever that might be. This is now there. I hope that New York is a little bit less New York noise-wise while I'm speaking, so I apologize if there is a lot of noise in the background. But first I've gotten an introduction, but I have not had an opportunity to introduce Jessica Best, who was one of the researchers on the project, also our phenomenal copy editor. If this is easy to read despite the density of the information in the guide, that is thanks to Jessica. And she wrote the staff and skills section. Jessica has been with MPP from the beginning. She was one of our original researchers and led the correspondence English language crowdfunding, led operations for the English language crowdfunding campaign, and has played a really key role in the sort of body of work that MPP has created in the last 3.5 years. So want to make sure Jessica got an introduction as well. Jess, do you want to run the slides?
Yeah, I'll run them now. Thank you for that, very generous.
And I'll start with a very brief introduction for people who might be new to MPP. There are very few people on the call that are new to MPP, but I'll do a very short intro to that and about the membership guide before we dive into job descriptions and staffing membership. It's not showing.
Yeah, you want to just jump into the present now thing? Are you presenting a tab?
I was. Let me just try it again.
Uh-huh.
We tried this morning and it worked.
It can be finicky, but it'll fire up at some point.
It tells me it's sharing. There we go.
There it is.
There we go. Nice.
It's all good.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks, Jess. So you don't need much more of an introduction after Alan and Rashad, but Membership Puzzle Project, we're a public research project now at good friends of Splice, the Media Development Investment Fund. We were previously housed at New York University, but we are now working closely with Patricia and the rest of the team. MPP is all about developing new knowledge in the struggle for sustainable public service press. We are particularly fascinated with membership as a way to solve the sort of twin trust and sustainability challenges that newsrooms are facing. We see membership as both a revenue model and an editorial orientation that sees readers as much more than an ATM. And we believe that audience engagement and audience revenue are two sides of the same coin. You can't ask people for their support without having earned their trust, without having shown up for them, and increasingly asked what they know that you don't. Next slide. MPP does sort of 4 key things. We study the needs of members of news organizations and the staff members that serve them. We share that knowledge and best practices in a very public, free fashion, as you saw with the membership guide this week. We convene communities of practice around membership to try and help move the practice forward, and we fund promising ideas for membership. That is one of the ways that we've gotten to know the Outriders team. They're one of the organizations that has some really interesting ideas about what membership models in news can look like, and we occasionally open up funding for projects like that. The sort of founding insight of MPP is the distinction between subscription and membership. Paid subscribers get access to a product. It's a transactional relationship that monetizes the access to the content. This revenue model works very well for many news organizations. I know the Ken has presented at Splice Beta, and I think the Ken is one of the best examples of when a subscription product works very well for the audience that they have in mind. But in membership, participating members give not just their money, but their time, their energy, and their ideas to join a cause because they believe in it. Members actively contribute in its deeper forms. It's a two-way knowledge exchange between the journalists and the members. It's an opportunity to identify your strongest supporters and to figure out how to enlist them in your quest for impact and sustainability. And one thing that we have learned a lot about in the last year in particular, and especially as we started writing this guide, is that people use the term membership in many different ways. And so we needed to actually make an effort to draw further distinctions from what we talk about when we talk about membership. And so with MPP, the way we have sort of broken down the parts of membership is you begin with a membership strategy, and that defines where membership fits within your organization, including how you will sustain the journalism, so what revenue membership will contribute, but also the role that audience members are going to play in your journalism. Memberful routines are a part of your membership strategy. Memberful routines are workflows that connect audience members to the journalism and the people producing it. And we very intentionally say audience members here, not members, because your memberful routines, if you want to be an inclusive media organization, they need to include the people who are not paying to support your work. There are many organizations out there that have these sort of memberful routines, which is engaged journalism, audience participation, co-creation, that have that without having a formal revenue generating membership program. But many organizations today also have membership programs, and we have started to distinguish that as the product your reader interacts with when they become a member. When they click that join button, when they click that support us button, and they decide to give you money to support your work, they are joining your membership program. It's sort of a container around all the people that have decided to financially support your organization. And in the membership guide, we try our best to distinguish when we're speaking about memberful routines or a membership program. And that is particularly important when you're thinking about staffing up your membership strategy. You need to be very clear about what your needs are and whether they fall into that memberful routines bucket, which might be more like community engagement, organizing, that kind of thing, or a membership program, which maybe gets more into sort of e-commerce aspects, like knowing how to manage the data of your members, knowing how to run a marketing campaign, that kind of thing. And the membership guide, which we've been chatting about on and off throughout the presentation, this was launched on Wednesday of this week. It is a tactical, practical guide to membership programs with 34 case studies, which is really just the starting point, and step-by-step processes for everything from identifying your membership value proposition to designing your membership program to implementing a sort of retention strategy for your members. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it because I would just love if people went and clicked through and played around on the site after the call. But we published that this Wednesday, and the goal there was to really put down in writing in a very usable form everything that MPP has learned from the past 3 years of working with newsrooms. I think that's all from me.
Thanks so much, Ariel. And hey, everyone. It's really exciting to be here talking about this. Now it's out in the world. It's felt like a long time we've been talking about it with each other, so it's so fun to be sharing it with you. As Ariel explained, I worked with her very high-level support on producing the staffing and skills chapter of the handbook. Just a kind of caveat, I guess, before I start talking about this. Initially, this session was it's billed as kind of staffing, job descriptions, and roles. One of the first things we found when we started talking to newsrooms about staffing membership is that a lot of newsrooms do not have the capacity to actually staff membership with extra hires. So a lot of the challenges that we were looking at was how do you staff membership with what you already have. So the way we've structured this presentation is actually kind of around the 5 most common problems we came across in this space and how you can solve them without necessarily making even a single hire and kind of how that can work for you if you're in a small or even a 1-person newsroom or a big newsroom as well. So just to kind of give you some context for why we're doing that. When we started thinking about staffing your membership strategy, we realized that this was a massive stumbling block for lots of newsrooms, because there's so much variation in how newsrooms deal with this. There are loads of different membership connected job titles. You hear membership manager, you might hear membership director, but you also might hear engagement editor, audience development. So there's huge variation there. There's big variations in where membership sits within a news organization. So for lots of people, it sits within audience development, but for others, it sits on the revenue and business side. And then a complicating factor is that something that we have said a lot as MPP, and you often hear it said in the industry, is that for membership to work, it should touch every part of the news organization. So it becomes this kind of confusing area. And as we mentioned, hiring for any extra capacity is often a non-starter for a lot of newsrooms, particularly small newsrooms. So it just becomes this headache for people. And as I said, I'm going to go through the kind of 5 most common headaches that we've come across, and hopefully give you some suggestions for how to solve them. So these are the 5 big problems we came across in our research. Newsrooms aren't sure what skills they should prioritize. Often they're not able to hire for anybody at all. They struggle to identify who should be responsible for membership. And then there are often disagreements about how you prioritize between the different departments dealing with membership. And then the very specific problems that come with staffing membership in the very smallest newsrooms. So the first problem I'll tackle today is what skills should we prioritize? And the big kind of takeaway that we hope to give through the guide is that if you're starting a membership program, then hiring new people doesn't need to be your first move. We're really encouraging newsrooms to think about skills before roles. Because it may be that you already have the necessary skills in your newsroom, and you might be able to meet your membership needs by building an interdisciplinary team instead. So one thing we're providing in the membership guide is a skills checklist. You can see kind of what the top of this looks like here. This is a downloadable, this is a PDF. I know we were bad-mouthing PDFs earlier, but this is a downloadable PDF from the guide that you can use with your team in your newsroom. We've created this so that you can carry out a skills audit of your newsroom to see which critical membership skills you might already have, where they exist, and the ones that you're lacking. So the checklist includes 3 different categories of skills, so critical skills, important skills, and nice to have skills. And it divides those skills into 4 different areas, which I'm gonna put up on the screen here. I'm not gonna read through these because that's kind of a boring presentation to just read straight from the slide, but you can see the 4 areas here of engagement, revenue, marketing and sales, research, data and analytics, and editorial. These are the critical skills that we think most newsrooms should be considering. I'll add a few caveats with this list. Which of the critical skills you need will depend on your approach to your membership strategy, your membership program, and memberful routines. As Ariel mentioned in the introduction, maybe you're a newsroom that uses memberful routines but doesn't have an actual membership program, in which case things like e-commerce management may be less important. So when you're thinking through your skills audit, that's something to think about. It will also depend on how developed your existing community is. We put engagement at the top of this list because if you don't have an existing community to manage, then you're going to struggle to develop your membership program in the first place, and you will have no need for the skills that are listed in the categories below. And the skills you need will change over time as your membership strategy grows. As I say, to begin with, you may want to focus down on engagement skills, community management, newsletter strategy. But as things develop, you will want to think more about, okay, well, how do we develop and test more member products, that kind of thing. So we don't hand this out as a kind of a list of must-haves, but it's somewhere to start and somewhere that you can start to think about how do we tackle this problem that feels quite difficult to wrestle with. One of the case studies we've included in the guide on this is the Daily Maverick. The case study is called How Daily Maverick Took a Skills-First Approach to Staffing Up Its Membership Program. For those who aren't familiar, the Daily Maverick are a national South African news organization. They started in 2009. They launched a membership program which is called Maverick Insiders in August 2018. And 2 years later, they have more than 13,000 members, and membership makes up about 25% of their revenue overall. They won one of Africa's Best Reader Revenue Strategy last year. And they also won Best Marketing Plan for their Maverick Insider marketing efforts. They're featured, I think, 3 or 4 times as case studies in the membership guide, because they really are a standout in terms of how you can build membership from the ground up. So I really recommend checking out this case study and the others on Daily Maverick, because we have so much to learn from them, and they are super open to sharing their learnings as well, which is fantastic. The case study is worth going to read in full, but just to give you a sense of what they did in terms of approaching their staffing or their hiring journey with a skills focus. 2 years in, they have 7 people on the Insiders team, but they built this up gradually by prioritizing for critical skills. So they began with just 2 people on the whole, well, not even working full-time on membership, but they began with 2 people looking at the membership idea at launch. So that was their publisher, Stilly, which many of you may have come across, and their head of product. But of course, they both had other responsibilities. Once they launched, they realized that the thing that would be critical initially would be engagement skills. They knew how important it was to connect and respond to their member community, and so their first hire was a part-time community manager. She went full-time within a couple of months. Next, they realized that engagement goes hand in hand with customer service, so they needed customer service skills. So the next hire was someone to help with inbox support. And with that came a realization that retaining hard-won members would be another top priority. And so skills in the retention area would be really, really important. So that person developed their role into being membership retention manager. Then they decided that events were going to be really key to their membership strategy. So they added an event specialist to help support that. And more recently, they've added a business administrator and a marketing manager. So you can see sort of through how they've layered these skills on, that they've built up depending on what the skills that they need over the last 2 years. Their advice on staffing, when we asked them what they would say to other newsrooms, was staff according to your membership priorities. So for them, this was engagement, retention, and events. And to layer the new team members on, as I just suggested, in priority order. I'm just going to take a brief pause there to ask, does anybody have any questions on skills? That's kind of a big section of the work we've done, and I just wondered if anybody has any questions there.
Can I just jump in with one? I'm slightly, well, not confused, but I'm interested in the role of publisher, and of course, this is Steely here that we all know and respect. But what is the role of the publisher in this case? Are we talking about a head of product? Is this person a head of membership, if you will? But how does he use that title publisher in this context?
So Ariel, jump in if you have extra to add. Steely was really foundational in getting buy-in for membership at the start. So he, when they started building out Maverick Insiders, was really going across the sort of the executive team and the rest of the newsroom, getting people to understand why membership would be central to Daily Maverick's revenue strategy long term. Today, the Maverick Insiders team, Stilly is not actually counted as officially part of the Maverick Insiders team. They now have a general manager for Maverick Insiders who is Fran Baden, who started out as their community manager. So Stilly was kind of there to build the foundations and push for resources to build out membership. And then once that buy-in was achieved, he was able to step back and then basically hire the team that would be specialists. Ariel, is there anything I've missed there?
No, I think the only thing I would say is that we'll have a whole section on culture change required to sort of bring a membership mindset to your newsrooms later this fall, because that if membership isn't relegated to like a mid-level person, they are expected to just make membership happen within the organization. They don't have the buy-in of somebody like the publisher or the editor-in-chief. They're going to really struggle to get the support from the rest of the newsroom. And so Stilly's involvement and sort of the fact that this came from the publisher level and he continues to advocate for membership is really key to the fact that membership has become such a essential component to the Daily Maverick's entire strategy, not just their revenue strategy.
And what about the membership retention manager? What's the role there about?
I can say a little bit about that because I was in their newsroom last year as Tinashe was becoming full-time. So there is a lot of e-commerce kind of things that can go wrong with membership. And I'm sure many Asian newsrooms encounter this as well. But like the Daily Maverick has dealt with an incredible amount of like credit card headaches. The payment processor that they have to use is really, really challenging. And a huge amount of their time is spent on just helping keep people's credit cards current and dealing with other sort of technological challenges around keeping people in the system, people trying to update their credit card and not being able to, or people forgetting to update their credit card because they change them over. Stilly told me some astonishing stat, which is the average lifetime of a credit card in South Africa is something like 6 months. So somebody's credit card number might be changing every 6 months between like fraud and people getting new cards and cards expiring and muggings and things like that. Like people's credit cards are just changing over constantly. And so it is a very significant part of Tinashe's time just helping people continue to pay the Daily Maverick, which they want to do. There's other elements to that as well, of course, like knowing when people are up for renewal and reminding them of that and things like that. And Adam at the Mail and Guardian is saying that they have encountered that same payment gateway challenge.
I know we'll have more questions. I have a ton of questions for later, but yeah, I could save them for closer to the end.
Yeah, we'll definitely pause for questions at the end as well.
Awesome. Very nice.
Okay, so the next common problem that we encountered was what if we can't hire anyone, which happens in newsrooms of all sizes. Perhaps you completed your skills audit and you've worked out where your critical skills exist in your newsroom. Perhaps you haven't had time to do that. But essentially our takeaway here was to look at where your critical membership skills exist across your organization and bring these people together to create an interdisciplinary team. What we found is that you might need new meetings, not new people. And in that way, you can make the most of the resources that you already have. Kind of best practice on this we've come across is Chalkbeat. They're a US-based news organization that covers education right across the country. They have built something called an AUD squad, short for Audience Squad. Over the last couple of years, they don't have a dedicated audience development team, and this is what they put in place of it. It's comprised of 5 senior leaders, including their director of earned revenue, their editor-in-chief, chief strategy officer, senior marketing manager, engagement editor, and director of product. And they meet every 2 weeks against a backdrop of a shared roadmap for audience development. And they have annual goals and key metrics that they track. And what they told us was that establishing like an interdisciplinary team has allowed them to bring ideas from across the newsroom together in one central place, and then they can hash out their priorities for member-related projects and work out how best to support the team. The case study in the guide gives a lot more detail on how they set their goals and metrics in relation to their audience funnel, and gives tips for working with cross-functional teams. So I really recommend checking that one out as well, to kind of go deeper into this idea of creating new meetings, not necessarily hiring new people. This is the third problem that we came across: who is responsible for what part of membership? As I mentioned at the top, one risk of the mantra that membership is everyone's responsibility is that it becomes no one's responsibility. This is something that we dealt with and wrestled with at The Correspondent. So whether you're hiring for a specific role to lead on membership or assign leadership within your existing staff, it's so important to clearly establish who is responsible for making sure that the work gets done. And establishing responsibility for membership work entails thinking beyond a single membership manager. We thought a lot about how a framework for how this could work for newsrooms of different sizes, and we turned to the framework known as RASI in the kind of business management world. So looking for every membership decision at the questions of who is responsible, who is accountable, who will be consulted, who will support the person responsible for membership work, and who needs to be kept informed. And we hope those set of questions will make sure that responsibility for membership is clearly indicated, but that it can still touch every part of the organization in the way that we think is really crucial, particularly if you have a membership strategy at what we term the thick end, where you have a lot of memberful routines work going on as well. If you're wanting to do this, we have a kind of a sort of chain of actions that we think you can take to apply this framework. So if you want to do this, you can think about the decision or the change or the problem that you're trying to tackle with membership. Break that decision down into component tasks. Identify the staff from multiple departments who may be involved, and then narrow and specify their participation. And then for each task, ask each of the RASI initials. As a sort of experiment, we asked the Texas Tribune in the US, again, to kind of indulge us by looking back at a membership decision they've made in the last couple of years and looking at how a RASI process would have worked for them. And this is the example they gave us. About a year ago, they wanted to simplify their membership tiers. They had some people, depending on how much money they gave, were called different things, either member or small dollar donor, and they wanted to bring everyone into line. And what you see here in the table down the left-hand side is where they've broken down this challenge into various tasks. Along the top, you see the various staff members from across departments that would be involved in getting this done. So LP is loyalty program manager, the sales administrator, the engineer, the CEO, and their audience specialist. And you can see, for example, in the top row, a review of their existing tier structure and retention data would be led by the loyalty program manager and R for responsible. The sales manager would need to be kept informed. Their engineer and CEO would need to be consulted on that process, and their audience manager would be the accountable person. So they showed that they could very clearly identify the lines of responsibility, and no one would be left in doubt about how to get that work done. Challenge number 4, how do we prioritize for members when we're thinking about staffing? Particularly in small newsrooms that have a single membership role, or perhaps where membership is part of someone's job. we found a lot of people told us that it's common that the membership responsible person has way too much responsibility, but not enough authority to meet those membership goals directly. And we refer to this in the guide as the responsibility authority gap. It comes up when someone who is responsible for all or part of a membership program needs to work through the priorities or resources of other people and teams to get their work done. And we've come up with a set of questions. We've stolen and adapted this from some things that Day Correspondent told us about how they deal with this problem. This is the sort of thing we think that you can ask with your membership responsible staff when trying to prioritize for members if priorities are kind of at cross purposes. So who is this story or product or project for? What member data audience insights do we have? How does this serve members? And who are the staff outside of membership that can make this happen? So we, again, offer these as examples of the type of questions you can ask, but we recommend coming up with your own set of member-centered questions that can help you and your colleagues navigate through those conflicting priorities and resources. The final area that we looked at is how do we staff membership on the smallest teams? If you're a one-person newsroom or the only person working on membership in your newsroom, we get that there is absolutely no way you could do everything outlined in the staffing section, and certainly no way you could do everything outlined in the guide. But we've come up with kind of 4 things that we'd recommend that you think about for staffing membership in small and one-person newsrooms. They are to prioritize for the critical skills. The skills list that we provide in the guide lists lots of skills that are kind of important or nice to have. We really suggest narrowing your focus to the critical skills if you're a small newsroom, particularly those connected to community management, metrics, measurement, and basic marketing. If you can be engaged with your community, measure the results of that, and tell other people about it, then you can keep the show on the road. We also suggest leaning on software and outsourcing to streamline your processes. Things like Zendesk for community engagement, those kind of things. The costs of those software might seem hefty when you first look at them. But if you calculate how much time it will save you and free you up to do the membership concerned work that only you can do, it may be a worthwhile investment. Something that Matt Kaiser from What the Fuck Just Happened Today, the Trump news site in the States, which he told us that being honest about what you can do and what you can't has been vital for him as a one-person newsroom. And we think that's really great advice. Setting realistic expectations with yourself and with your members is key. And Cheryl Dorsey at The Plug also told us that you don't have to do everything members ask you to do. If you explain why you're not going to do something, that's fine. And as long as you're being honest about that, then that will help you to not overload yourself. And keep it simple. It might sound really attractive to have multiple membership tiers, for example, but the resources and staff time that multiple membership tiers take is way more complicated than what it is to have one membership tier. So if you're a small newsroom or one-person newsroom, the simple ideas are usually the best way to keep things manageable. There is a lot more in the staffing section, other things that we offer there. One of the things we get asked a lot is how do we write membership job descriptions? We've provided a whole collection of, I think there's more than 20 to maybe 25 job descriptions from newsrooms around the world that we put together in a little library there for people to dig into and take and adapt for their own purposes. So that's well worth having a look around. 2 of the areas that kind of connect to staffing are the tasks that your membership responsible staff should be doing. We've got sections on the kind of ongoing tasks, the daily, regular things that you need to be doing to support membership, and the periodic tasks, so what needs to be done monthly, quarterly, yearly. We've got details on how members can help you staff membership. Are there skills gaps that they can help you fill? And we've also got a section on how do we staff membership during a crisis. Obviously, we're releasing this guide during the pandemic, which has put huge pressures on lots of newsrooms. But it's a section that could also be useful, for example, wildfires, other tragedies or crises that your particular community may be facing, that put extra pressure on you. There's some advice in there about how you can keep your staff able to deal with those things as well. At this point, I will hand back to Ariel, but I would be really thrilled to answer any questions on all the stuff we've discussed there, and also to hear if there are things that we haven't mentioned that would be useful additions to the guide at a later date. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jess. This is very, very brief because I want to leave time for questions. Just MPP has been extended for 1 more year. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have a new home with the Media Development Investment Fund. We're really excited to marry the knowledge that MPP has gathered for the last 3 years with the incredible level of regional expertise that MDIF brings. We will be focusing in this final year on Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Eastern Europe. We will be launching later this fall a second iteration of the Membership and News Fund, which supports experimentation with membership. More out on that over our email lists and whatnot. You will be sure to see that information when it is out. And we will be continuing to make updates to the membership guide. We'll be adding case studies on a sort of as needed basis and on a quarterly basis, adding new components to the sort of practical advice of the handbook. So if there are things that we're missing, case studies that you think we should look into, organizations we should be talking more about, please let us know. One of the reasons it is a site and not a PDF is so that it is easy to update, to sort of track the way membership is changing and evolving over time. Questions? Are there any in the chat?
Well, that's excellent. I'm going to come. I definitely want to come to Fahad's question in a minute. And right on cue, Mariam Chaudhry, also co-founder founder of The Current, has also joined. But before I get to Fahad's question, I had a question of my own for Jessica or Ariel. I wanted to ask, this is a desperate year for newsrooms. And, is a membership program something that you've seen work as a desperate measure? Is that a case study that you've come across?
We've seen many organizations launch membership programs in the last 6 months as advertising revenue has just cratered really rapidly. I think in those cases, it's initially more of a crowdfunding effort than it is a membership program. And I think it's hard to say what happens to those programs when we emerge from the coronavirus crisis. I think if an organization is going to sort of rapidly spin up a membership program in a moment like this, with advertising has cratered, our event strategy is no longer viable, please support us to ensure we continue to exist. That has worked in the short term very, very well. It's hard for us to say whether those programs will be sustained past this year because most of those organizations haven't changed anything about their staffing workflows or relationship to their readers to fully integrate membership into the organization. So it's hard to give a firm answer. And I would say those organizations, sorry, New York noise, airplane, those organizations that have done this need to be preparing for the fact that it's going to be very hard to retain people who join during a crisis. So they need to have a retention strategy already if they have launched a membership program in this moment. These members, as the crisis sort of eases, when that eases, they might feel that information is less urgently needed. And so these organizations need to think about how they're going to keep them.
Hey, Fahad, why don't you jump in with your question? Fahad's from The Current in Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Alan, for the opportunity. So my question is, basically, we are planning to start a first membership model in Pakistan, and we are a small newsroom team. However, I'm assigned a role for data analytics, social media, marketing, and content strategy. So we are very much passionate about data insights, and because we strive for accuracy. So I wanted to know what tools, what insights, what are the tools, and what are the tips and tricks for it, and what exactly we can use to get maximum data of our consumers who are our maximum consumers who are following us, who are a loyal audience. I have already started some certifications on Facebook Blueprint, Google Digital Garage. Is there anything else you can suggest to me? So, we can save some time and get results, So, yeah, that's much. Nothing much. Thank you so much.
So we refrain from suggesting specific tools because there's just too much international variation to cover that effectively. But our tech stack section looks at like the 6 or 7 tools that a mature membership newsroom needs and breaks down the features that you need to make sure the tool that you sort of hire to do the work has. So I dropped the link to the tech stack section there, and that's sort of the best that we can offer given the international variation in tools, but it does specify what features in the CRM, for example, are nice to have versus must-haves. And also some really important advice on just choosing vendors and how to avoid technological mistakes that can create a huge mess for you to manage in the long run. So I would direct you to that section, not to get out of giving an answer, but that we tried to focus, similar to focusing on skills over roles, we focused on features versus specific tools in the tech stack section so that you could evaluate what's most common in your country or in your region against the features that you need to have.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Fahad, also, right on the heels of what you're asking, Alan's just dropped the link in there right now, but I want to point you to Monday, September 28th. Emma Carrew-Grovem's session is going to be awesome. Yeah. She did a little, she wrote a really a great article for Membership Puzzle Project, and we carried it on Splice on a good tech stack. And so you'll find that very useful.
Definitely, I will. Actually, you might have observed that I have been trying to, get answer for this question for last couple of days, because especially in Pakistan, there is no culture of, looking into data and, making data-driven decisions. So, we actually trying really hard to bring precision in our work. That is the objective of
sure,
asking all these questions.
Hey, you don't need it to be a national culture. You can make it your organization's culture. That's something that we've all seen go really far. Evan, can I come to your question? Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'll hop on video too.
Absolutely wonderful.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much to Splice Beta for hosting and for the presentation from MPP. My quick question was, I've found this so incredibly helpful as we've tried to develop our membership program at the Behavioral Sciences. And one thing that I'm curious about is I've talked to some other news organizations who are kind of having similar questions and everything. And obviously the guide is super important, but we're always kind of learning in real time. So I'd love it if this is a bit meta, I guess, but if the MPP would continue going forward, and I would certainly support it financially as a member. And I think other organizations might as well, just because of the amount of value that it adds. So my question is would MPP consider existing in the future, maybe as a membership organization?
That's very kind of you. Thank you. Our reason for sunsetting MPP is not because we think it will be less important, but that we focus so much on diffusing our knowledge across the ecosystem. A huge part of the reason that we're joining MDIF is to work with their incredible teams of coaches and consultants, so that those coaches and consultants also gain the knowledge of how to support and teach and foster membership. And that has already happened in the United States, and that's one of the and in Europe, and that's one of the reasons why we are not focusing in the US and Europe for this final year. Membership, there is no subscription based organization, and our hope is really that we can create help catalyze enough success, and frankly, uplift the organizations that are doing it right. The Daily Maverick now knows more than I do about how to run a membership program. And I think our goal is to uplift the organizations that are exemplary so that they become the voices for what membership looks like, and to help diffuse the knowledge across the ecosystem to other consultants, to other coaches. In the United States, where it sounds like you're based, there's RevLab, there's the American Press Institute, there's the Facebook Membership Accelerator, there is probably a couple of others that I'm forgetting about. So our goal is to diffuse the knowledge, because we don't want to be an institution that has to be funded forever. Same as news organizations can't continue to be funded forever by foundational money. Our goal is to make ourselves non-essential by creating this practice elsewhere. But I very much appreciate the endorsement.
Think about it.
We're all in favor of this. You know, we love
Exactly.
you, Ariel.
Member number one.
Since you're unmuted right now, why don't you ask a question around conversions? I think this is a great one, and Miriam Chowdhury agrees. This is an important question to ask.
Yeah, so Miriam and I have talked, and I am not an expert, but I like to hang out with experts like Ariel and Jessica. Let me just say that. So there's two things that we run across all the time, Ariel and Jessica, is that often media organizations think, and I'm going to use an average number, I have 100,000 unique followers, I'm going to convert 100,000 people to become members. And we know that that is very far from the truth. So I'd love for you to give, if you could give an average of a minimum milestone that people could do. And with that, I think very linked to that is that if people are not properly prepared, do you see damage that can be done if you don't really plan this properly?
You want me to start, Jess, and then if you...
You want to take the conversion question? I think you've dealt with that section much more comprehensively than me.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the challenges, is like benchmarks are really hard to give globally. There's, in the United States, where there's a culture of paying for news at this point, that conversion rate is maybe going to look much more different than someplace like, it sounds like in Pakistan, where that's really just beginning to take hold. We see, if you have something like a newsletter list that is highly engaged, we see about a potential to convert about 10% of your newsletter subscriber list into members. Site visitors is much, much more variant. And this is something that we're really hoping to understand more in this final year. In the US, membership strategy is very newsletter centric. And so we have stronger benchmarks around newsletter conversion rates. We have seen like 1 to 5% of monthly unique visitors as being a very, very rough benchmark for membership. But I offer that with a lot of hesitance, because digital membership models are only like 4 or 5 years old, broadly speaking. There's a few earlier adopters, but we're just so early in the process. But 1 to 5% of monthly unique visitors is what we think is reasonable to expect. And I think Patricia brings that up because it's a much smaller percentage than people potentially hope. And then about 10% of the newsletter list are, we're beginning to see experimentation with marketing membership through WhatsApp groups or WhatsApp lists. I'm really curious. We're studying Radio Ambulante, who is going to be doing this fall, to understand what the conversion rates of a WhatsApp group looks like, where it's a even more intimate relationship than email. So not a super satisfying answer, but we're looking into it to try and understand if we can get to the point where we understand some benchmarks around this.
Thanks, Ariel. That fits with what we found. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Please. Go ahead, Pat, please.
No, I was just going to say that the 1 to 3% is the number that we're also finding across all boards. And I will add to Ariel's comment is that we always tell people, look at those numbers, not to scare you, but your return on investment and the effort that you have to do so that you have good expectations rather than the other way around. That is a bad surprise.
The metrics section of the handbook has some excellent guidance on the types of things you can track, and also how to work out your own benchmarks if there aren't some available. So I would direct people to have a look at that if you're kind of still grappling for solid figures. That's a great start. On the damage question, Ariel, I think you probably agree that yes, absolutely, you can do more damage with a poorly planned try than nothing at all. I think one of the things that I found through working with newsrooms and then with MPP is if you doing the groundwork on your brand values and your value proposition is probably the thing that people maybe shy away from doing a little bit. I'm thinking about marketing as well. Bringing marketing into your newsroom feels scary still for a lot of editorial people, but it's vital to think about how you're going to market yourself, because your marketing, your journalism, everyone has to be part of that. Everybody has to be brand ambassadors for that in membership. So those are the kind of the areas that people shy away from, but those are crucial. And if they're not done properly, then you're kind of shouting into the void, and you won't see results. Ariel, I'm sure you have more to add there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we really caution organizations to do is, like, the word member means something. It has a connotation of a two-way relationship. And so if you offer someone the opportunity to become a member, and then when they reach out to you, you tell them, like, no, stay in the corner. Like, you're just supposed to let us do our job. Like, you're going to lose that member. So if you don't want audience involvement in your work, consider an annual crowdfunding campaign that doesn't come with that promise. Consider a donations model. This is not, the membership is not for every organization. If you are not comfortable offering participation and transparency to your supporters, like, you potentially need to look at other options that are available to you, because the worst thing that can happen is somebody reaches out to you because they want to embrace that membership role, and then you tell them that they're not welcome there. And that you're going to have a very hard time retaining people past that first year if that's your attitude about them.
Thank you so much, Ariel and Jessica. This has been really wonderful. You look at all the questions here, such great questions, and so important and so fundamental as well. And thank you for all the links that you dropped into the chat box. I think that's going to be wonderful. There's going to be a lot of reading this weekend for everyone. Just a reminder, we've got a whole bunch of membership related sessions at Splice Beta. So you just check out that link there that I've popped into the chat box. You'll find all the sessions there. So I hope we can keep this conversation going, because I think these are very important questions that everyone's asking. So thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful. This is the end of our third week at Splice Beta. Many more sessions ahead, but much needed rest for all of us here at Splice.
And go read that guide, people. This is gold. We're really,
right.
really
Yeah, we don't mean to keep we don't mean to keep pushing people to it, but we basically designed it so that you don't have to get on a conference session with us to answer your questions. So we hope that it does that.
No, exactly. In fact, Pooja's question and Mariam's question, you will find the answers there. Otherwise, I know that Ariel and Jessica are very, very easy to reach. Jump in there and ask them. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Ariel.
weekend.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, everybody who stayed in
Bye.
on a Friday night to listen to us.
I know you guys still have all of Friday to go. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.